Welcome back to another project. In this project, we are going to calculate the body mass index or BMI based on the height and the weight of the user. As you can see from the final version of the project, we have two inputs here that is going to get the height of the user based on centimeter and also the weight of the user based on kilogram. And the default value is 180 and for the height and 80 for the weight. And if we click on the compute BMI, this is going to calculate the BMI based on the height and weight and shows the weight condition here. For example, for the 180 and 80, the weight condition is normal weight. But if we are, for example, 90 kilograms, we are overweight. If we are, for example, 100, we are obesity. And if we, for example, we are 50 kilograms, we are underweight. So this is going to calculate the BMI, and based on the BMI condition, we are going to add some if statement and calculate the weight condition here. So we're going to firstly install the project with this neumorphism design. Then we are going to use JavaScript to calculate the BMI. And finally, we are going to show all the results inside this input and inside this section, the text information at the end of the container. In the next section, we're going to start with the HTML part of the project. So see you in the next section. All right, welcome back to the project. In this section, we're going to create the HTML part of the project. I have opened the final version of the project for our reference to compare our website with the final version, and also we can be familiar with the structure of the project. So if you look at the final version, we have a title here at the top. Then we have two inputs, which are the number input. Then we have a button. Then we have another input showing the result of the BMI. Then we have also have another information text at the end of the place. All these things are inside a container. So we have to create a div with a class of container and work on this inside this container. And so let's first create an HTML file. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as a text editor, but you can use any other text editor you are familiar with. After closing the Get Started tab, in the File menu, we can click on the Open Folder to create a folder and open it inside the Visual Studio Code. I would like to create the project in my desktop, so I click here on Desktop, and here I click on the New Folder button to create a new folder, and we call the folder the name of our project, which is BMI Calculator. After creating the folder, we can click on the Select Folder to select the folder. This is going to open the folder inside the Visual Studio Code. As you can see here, we are inside the Explorer with the folder BMI-Calculator. So let's close the Get Started tab again, and inside the Explorer section and inside the folder that we have created, we create a new file by clicking on this icon. We call the file index and with the extension HTML. So this is our HTML file, which is completely empty, but we can use an exclamation mark to create a new HTML boilerplate. So we click on we just write down an exclamation mark and we click on the first auto suggestion suggested by Emmet abbreviation. So now we have the HTML boilerplate, which includes the doc type at the top, which tells the browser which version of HTML we are using. And for HTML5, we just need to have HTML here. Then we have an HTML tag, which covers the head and the body tag. The lang attribute inside the opening tag of the HTML sets the language of the page. And in our case, we set the language to be English by just writing EN inside the code. Then we have the head tag, which includes the metadata tags and also the title tag. The first metadata tag sets the chart set, attributes, and we use UTF-8, which is recommended by HTML5 because it nearly contains all the characters and symbols, and the person who is using our website won't have any problem seeing the symbols and the characters of the text. The next metadata tag is the compatibility metadata tag, which tells the Internet Explorer browser to use the most recent rendering engine, which is Edge. So this is for the users who are using still the Internet Explorer. Then we have the viewport metadata tag, which sets the width of the screen to the device's width, which means if the screen size is smaller, like the mobile size, the width of the browser, the width of the page would be smaller when we are using a bigger screen like laptop or the desktop screens. The next section inside the viewport metadata tag, it's the initial scale or initial zoom level of the browser, and we set it to be 1, which is equal to 100%. After that, we have the title tag, which sets the title of the page inside the browser, which is now document. Let's see it inside the browser. By opening the browser, we can use the live server extension by clicking on Go Live. And this is going to open our website inside our default browser, which in my case is Google Chrome. You can see that the title is document. Let's bring this one to the right side so we can see the changes in real time. And we bring the Visual Studio Code to the left side. We can close the Explorer section so we have more space in our code. Let's change the title to the name of our project, which is BMI Calculator. Now we can see the title has been changed to BMI Calculator. So as I mentioned before, if you look at the final version, we have a container that has everything inside it. So inside the body section, we can create a div with a class of containers. So we just need to write down a period and container. And after pressing the enter, we're going to accept this auto suggestion that is going to give us a div with a class of container. And inside this container, we're going to start with the heading, this heading, which is an h1 tag, the h1 tag with a class of heading. I have added the class because we want to later use CSS to style this HTML file on our website. So we need to target each element by its class. So the class here is heading. And inside the h1 tag, we just write down body mass index, or BMI for short. And we just add calculator at the end. So if you look at our website, we can see the title at the top. Let's fix this one. So that is correct. Body mass index calculator as a title. After the title, we have two inputs. First for the height, and then we have for the weight. And here we just have a text. We just say your height, and we just say centimeter. And we add the input here. This input has a class of input, because we want to use this class to style it later. And it has an ID of height. So the input has a type of text, but we want the input to be in the class, in the type of number, because we just want to accept the number here. And we can change the number here. So it has a class of input and the ID of height. We're going to style it using this class, and we're going to target that using JavaScript and get the number from this input using JavaScript using this ID. And also I want the default value of this input to be, for example, 180 centimeter. So when we refresh the page and come to this website, you always see 180, and you can change it after that. And also I want a placeholder, a text inside the input. When it's empty, we just say enter your height in centimeter. So if this one is empty, you see this placeholder. All right, so we have created the first input. The second input is similar to the first one, so we can just copy this one using Alt-Shift-Arrow down one time, and we just change this height to weight. Centimeter should be kilogram, and the input, the class is input, but the ID is weight. The value, just say 80 kilograms, and the placeholder is enter your weight in kilogram. All right, So we have completed the first two inputs. The next things we need to add is this button. So we're going to add a button here. The button is going to have a class. So it has a class of btn, which is a short for button. I usually use btn, and we add an ID to target it later using JavaScript, and we call the ID btn as well. And inside the button, we just write down compute or calculate BMI. So you see the button here. And after that, we're going to have another input showing the results. So we just say we add an input with the class of input, but with the ID of BMI or BMI result. We can say BMI result. This input doesn't have any placeholder or something, but we want this input to be disabled because we don't want to change the value of this. We just want to show the result here. So we made this one disabled. After the button, we have this info text here. So we're going to have an h4 or heading 4 with a class of info-text. And this one is going to say weight condition equal to, and we want to add the condition inside the span. So we want to separate that. And then this span, because it is dynamic, later we're going to change it using JavaScript. It is going to have an ID of the weight condition. All right. Like the final version, for example, if we click on compute BMI, we see the weight condition, which can be a normal weight of if someone is overweight, for example, is 120 kilogram, it shows obesity. So it depends on the weight, you see a different thing. So we're going to create this one using JavaScript later, but for now, we just keep it empty. So that was it for the HTML part of the project. It's a kind of messy, but later in the next section, we're going to style this using CSS, and we're going to make it like this beautiful, as you can see in the final version. So just wait for it. It looks a little bit messy. In the next section, we're going to work on the CSS part of the project. So see you in the next section. All right, in the last section, we have completed the HTML part of the project. In this section, we're going to style the project using CSS. The first things we need to do is to create a CSS file inside the Visual Studio Code. We need to go to the Explorer section again using Ctrl-Shift-E. And here on the top, we click on this icon to create a new file with the name style with the extension CSS. And now we can just code inside this file. But before using the CSS file, we need to add a link to this file within the HTML code. So we go back to index.html. Let me close this section so we have more space. And just after the title tag, we add a link tag. We just write down link and we just click on the third auto suggestion, the one with the CSS. Now we have a link tag with the relationship between the HTML file and the CSS file. And the href here defines the destination of the file, which is because they are on the same directory. We just need to write down style.css inside the href attribute. Now we can use the style.css in our project. And first we start with the body section. We just write body. And first we remove the margin, the default margin of the page. And we set it to be 0 to remove the margin. Okay. After this, I'm going to change the background color. I want to have a gradient in color like the one you see inside here, inside the final version. It starts from blue to green. So in order to create that, this one should be only background, not background color. And we just write down linear gradient, and we want it to be on the top right to be green and on the bottom left to be blue. So we just say to left bottom, and with the color we want to use, the first color is light green. It starts from light green to light blue. Now, if you look at our final version, we see that the color, but the reason it's repetitive because we haven't set any height for our screen because it doesn't have height. So it's repeating itself. So we're going to fix it soon. So first, we're going to bring everything to the center using display flex. We set the display to flex, and we set the height of the screen to be, or the minimum height to be 100% of the viewport height. So which is the 100% of the screen. Now you see the color is just one color. So now the size of the screen is 100% of the size of the browser. If you change the zoom level, still you see the same size, 100%. Now we can bring everything to the center using justify content center to bring them to the center horizontally like this. And for bring them to the center vertically, we can use align item center to bring them to the center vertically. And also I want to change the font of the text to be Courier New, the font family Courier New, which is this text. This is my favorite font, but you can use any other font you want, or you can import the fonts from other sources like a Google font, which I have taught in my other projects. All right, so that was it for the body section. Now we want to style this container that is covering everything. The container, if you remember, we had a div with a class of container. Because this one is class, we can target that one inside the CSS by adding a dot here, and we just write down container. So the background color for the container is RGBA, which is the red, green, blue alpha color. For the red, green, and blue, we just choose 255, 255, and 255, which gives us a white color. And we want this white color to be 30% transparent, so we can see the behind the color as well. So this one makes a glassy design or neumorphism design for our container. After that, I want to add some padding. So it's a space around the elements, but inside the container. So this is going to be 20 pixels. So this is going to push everything inside. And let's bring everything on top of each other by changing the display to flex, which bring everything to the next to each other. And then we can change the flex direction from row to column to bring everything on the top of each other like this. Now everything looks better than before, but we still have to work on this section. For example, I want to make the border rounded by using border radius, and we set the border radius to be 5 pixels. You can see it now here. I have to zoom so you can see the rounded corner here. Okay. After the border radius, let's add some shadow effect on the bottom. We just use box shadow, and we set the shadow effects in the x-axis to 0, 10 pixels for the y-axis, which gives us this black color on the bottom. But we can use 10 pixels blurriness to make it blurry, and this is going to be blurred on the right and left side as well. And also, I don't want it to be this much black, so we can make it less transparent by using RGBA, red, green, blue, and alpha color. We set the 0 for the red, green, and blue, which gives us the black color. And we can use 30% transparency, so which give us this beautiful shadow effect for our container. But in the mobile side, you see that they are connected to the wall, the container. So we can here change the margin to 5 pixels, which is going to push everything to the inside more. And also I want to, I think everything looks okay now for the container. Let's style this heading. If you remember here, we have the H1 with the class of heading. We can target that one by just adding dot heading in the CSS file. And we change the font size to be 30 pixels, for example, and make it a little bit smaller. And for the inputs, we have 3 inputs, but all of them, they have a class of inputs. This one, and this one. We can target them using dot input. And let's add some padding. We add the padding for the top and bottom, 10 pixels and 20 pixels for left and right. Let's make the size bigger using font size, and we set it to be 18 pixels like this. And let's change the background. The background color, I want to choose the RGBA, that 255 for the white and 30% transparency. But 30% is a bit low. We can change this one to 40%. As you can see, the border color is black. I want the border color to be RGBA as well, but instead of 40%, I want it to be 50% transparent, so it gives us this beautiful looking border. And let's set the margin and the space around the input to 10 pixels. It's going to have some space around the inputs. So the inputs looks fine. Let's install this button now. The button has the class of btn, as you can see here. So we can target that button by just saying .btn. I want the background color to be light green, like this. I want to remove the border, so we just say border none. But instead of this border, I want to give it some box shadow, so we make it more beautiful. But let's add some padding first. So we just add a padding of 10 pixels on the top of and bottom, and 20 pixels for left and right. And we add some border radius, and we make it rounded on the corners for 5 pixels. Let's add some margin similar to the one we added for the input, 10 pixels. And we set the font size to be 20 pixels to make it bigger. Now it's time to add the box shadow. So we just add the box shadow. We set it to be 0 for the x-axis and 0 for the y-axis. Just 4 pixels blurriness that gives a shadow in around it. And we can use RGBA, the black color with 30% transparency, to make it less visible. And when I hover over the button, I want to see a pointing hand instead of the cursor. So I set the cursor to be pointer. So when I hover over the button, I see a pointing hand. The other things I want to do, when I hover over the button, I want to see more shadow. So we target the button, but we use the hover pseudo class. We can target the hover effect, and we change the box shadow 0, 0 for the x and y axis, and 8 pixels blurriness, which is more than the previous one. And we set the RGBA to black color, 30% transparency, like this. But this is very fast. It changes very fast. We can add some transition to make it smooth, and we added transition to everything with 30 milliseconds duration and with ease effect. So this is going to be like this. The last thing I want to install is this weight condition text at the bottom. This one has a class of info text. Now we just change the font size to be 20 pixels. We make it bigger, and we set the font weight to be 500 to make it thinner, like this. So that was it for the CSS part of the project. We made the website exactly like the final version. In the next section, we're going to add a functionality that we can calculate the BMI by clicking on the button. And also we want to calculate the weight condition based on the BMI. So we're going to use JavaScript to firstly get the information from the inputs, and we're going to calculate the BMI and show it inside this input. And based on the BMI, we're going to show the weight condition. So see you in the next section for the JavaScript part of the project. All right, in the last section, we have completed the CSS part of the project. In this section, we're going to start adding functionality to the project using JavaScript. If you look at the final version, you can see by just changing this input, for example, I just choose 160 centimeters with 50 kilograms, and we click on the compute BMI, we get the BMI of the person, which is calculated based on a formulation. So I'm going to show you the formulation. Then based on this BMI, we're going to calculate the weight condition that can be normal, obesity, underweight, or overweight. So we're going to create these conditions. The using if statement in JavaScript based on the BMI. The first things we need to do is to create the JavaScript file. So here inside the VS Code, we're going to open the Explorer using Ctrl-Shift-E, and here on the left side in the Explorer section, we click on this icon to create a new file. And we call the file index with the extension JS, which stands for JavaScript. So we have the JavaScript file here, but before using the JavaScript, we need to add a link to the HTML file for this JavaScript file as well, like the one we did for the CSS file. So we go to index.html, and just at the end of the body section, because we need all the elements to be loaded before calling the JavaScript file. Otherwise, the JavaScript doesn't work because we need to manipulate some elements here. And here at the end of the body section, we add a script tag. We just write down SC and we click on the second auto suggestion, the one with the SRC. And the SRC is the destination of the JavaScript file. And as both files, I mean the index.html and index.js, are located at the same directory, the source or SRC is just index.js. Now we can use the JavaScript file inside the project. We can close the Explorer section by dragging it to the left side to have more space. And let me show you what we need to do. So we need to add an event listener to this button. So when we click on the button, we are going to call a function. So in the final version that we have, now when we click on the button, nothing happens. But we can bring this button element first. The button here has an ID of btn. So we can bring and target this element inside the JavaScript using getElementById method. So we could just create a constant and we call it btn element. And this is going to be equal to document because we want to target all the document inside the browser. Then we just use getElementById method and we just need to call the ID. And the ID of the button is btn. So now we have access to the element. We got the element here. Now we can add the event listener to it. So we just say btn element dot add event listener, and the event we want to add for this one is click. And then we want to call a function. We're going to calculate the BMI inside the function. So I'm going to call the function calculate BMI. And we need to create the function here. So I just create a function. I call it calculate BMI, and we're going to show it like this. Let's console log this one, and we just console log, for example, clicked. And inside the final version, if you open the console using F12, let me just go to the console. So you need to click here and just go to the console. And the console is empty, but when we click on this button, we are going to print clicked because we are calling that function, and the function has a console log saying clicked. Each time we click on the button, we see the number of click is going up. So the function is working and the add event listener is working as well. So instead of just console logging click, we're going to calculate the BMI based on the inputs that we have here. So we have two inputs at the top, one for the height, the ID is height, and one is weight here. So we're going to firstly bring these two inputs inside the JavaScript using the getElementById method, and we get their value. So instead of console logging, we're going to create another constant, and we call it, for the first one, we just call it height value. And this is going to be equal to document because we want to target the document, and we use getElementById to target that the ID of that input, which was height. And we want to get the value, so we need to target the value at the end by just adding dot value. We need to do the same things for the weight as well. So I copy this one using Alt-Shift-Arrow down. And here we just change this height, both of them, by just using Ctrl-D. I'm going to delete it and add weight value. So now we have both of the values. Let me console log and see. So if I console log height value and also the weight value, Now, when we click on the button, we see the value of the first and the second input. For example, if I change this one to 50 and this one to 20, and we click on compute, we get 50 and 20. So we have access to the both of the inputs inside the JavaScript here. Now we can calculate the BMI based on the height and the weight. The formulation is height over the weight square. But the height should be based on meter, but the weight is based on kilogram. Because we are getting the height based on centimeter, so we can convert this one to meter by dividing it to 100. So now we are getting the height based on meter. So we can now calculate the BMI. So we just say BMI value is equal to that formulation. So the formulation is the weight value. So weight over the height square. So I think I made a mistake saying that first time. So it's weight over height value multiplied to height value again. So height value square at the bottom, but weight value at the top. But height is based on meter and weight is based on kilogram. So now we have the value of the BMI. So we can, for example, console log BMI value. So based on these values, 180 and 80, we compute. So the BMI is 24. So if I change this one to 100, for example, 92, the BMI is 21. So we have the BMI. Now we want to print this BMI inside this input. So we need to first bring this input inside the JavaScript by using the getElementById method. We can bring it at the top because the first we just need to bring it one time. We don't need to bring it each time we call the function. So I'm going to create a constant, and I call it BMI input element, and this is going to be equal to document.getElementById, and the ID that we are going to target is this one here. This input has the ID of BMI result. So I'm going to copy this and I paste it here inside this getElementById. So now we have the value of the BMI here. So we're going to put it inside this BMI input element. So here I just write down BMI input element dot inner text. Oh, sorry. We need to change the value because this is the input. We change its value to this BMI value. So I paste it here. So now if we click on compute BMI, we see the 24 inside this input. And if we change it, for example, to 190, we see it's 22. So we've done with the first part, that is computing the BMI and showing it here inside the input. The next step is to calculate the weight condition. So I'm going to put some condition here, and this is just the scientific condition. So if the BMI value is less than 18.5, the weight condition is underweight. So we need to bring that the text info at the end, this one. So we added a span here. The span is empty, but it has an ID of weight condition. So we need to bring this one here. So at the top, I'm going to create another constant, and I call it a weight condition element. And this is going to be equal to document.getElementById, and the ID that we have copied was weight condition. Now we can change the value inside this span, this element, by just bring it here, and we just changed its inner text, and we set it to be, for example, underweight. All right. So in this situation that, for example, this person is 180, the BMI is 24. But if, for example, he's 50 kilograms, so it's kind of underweight. And if we calculate BMI, the BMI is less than 18 here. So it's 15. So now we can see the weight condition is underweight. So let's add the other conditions. For example, we just add the else if, and the second condition is if the BMI value is more than or equal of 18.5, and if the BMI value is less than or equal to 24.9, in this condition, we want to set the weight condition element inner text. Instead of underweight, we want to set it, we just call it normal weight. So for example, for the 180 and 80 kilograms, we are normal weight. But because the BMI is less than 24.9 and it's above 18.5. So let's add more conditions. We have two more conditions. So we just say else if the BMI value is more than or equal to 25, sorry, more than that, not less than. So more than 25 and it's less than, so the BMI value is less than or equal to 29.9, the condition is overweight, and the other condition is obesity. So if the BMI value is more than or equal to 30, the condition is obesity. So this is a two fact. All right. So now the height, for example, is 180. This is normal weight. If we, for example, we are 90 kilogram, we are overweight. If you are 120 kilogram, we still overweight. 150. Oh, this is overweight. That's a lot. Okay, probably the last condition doesn't work. This one should be more than 30. Sorry about that. So now I think it's around 100. It's obesity. Okay. So that's working. So we finished, we have done the last part of the project, which was calculating the weight condition based on the BMI and show the condition inside this span. Yeah, that was it for our project. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. We have learned some methods like how to calculate something, how to call a function, how to add an add event listener. That was a simple project. I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next project.